Let's sketch two bees in love using alcohol markers in this 10-minute alcohol marker tutorial. And don't worry about having the exact supplies, you can work with what you have. So let's get started. Oh my gosh, they're so in love.
It's color, it's color for Christy.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is draw a couple of little circles or big circles, depending on how size you want your bees to be, or how big you want your bees to be. I'm just using a light yellow here. You can use whatever color you want, but I chose one of my light yellows. It's not my lightest, but it's one of the lighter ones. And I'm only going to use two colors for the bees, so I didn't want to go too light. Next, I'll grab a darker color, just a little bit darker of a yellow, and I'll color about halfway up the bee. I'm sorry I forgot to record the first part of it, but the rest of the video is recorded, so don't worry about it. Now I'm going to add a little branch that they're sitting on using a bit of a light brown color. I think this is actually from a skin tone set, this brown I'm using, but you can use any brown or gray even. You'll see later that I'm using a little bit of gray to add to this branch. So you could actually start with a gray and then add in a little brown, or just leave it totally gray. It's up to you. So I'm just making sure that the little bums of the bees are hanging over the branch. Then I'll go in with a little bit of a darker brown color just under the branch. This will act like a little bit of a shadow. And you'll notice that I'm trying not to make it a perfect line. I want it to look a little jagged and natural. I don't want it to be a perfect line. And I'll be adding a little bit of shadow around the bees where they're sitting so that it's a little bit darker on the branch where they're sitting. Here's where I'm adding in a little bit of gray. This marker is from my grayscale set, but you can use whatever grays that you have. You'll notice that most trees are actually mostly gray with a little bit of brown. Next, I used a gray to do the circles for the eyes. I go in later and add a darker black color, but I don't know why I always do this. I always go in with a gray first. I always have the intention of making it look round with like a darker shadow underneath, but it always ends up being fully black anyway. So then I just grabbed a really dark gray. I don't think I actually even went full black on this. It's just a really dark gray, and I'm filling in that gray circle on both bees, on both eyes. They just look better when they're darker. I don't know why I do this, but it's just a silly thing. One of those weird habits that you get into when you start drawing, I guess. So for the next part, you can either use your marker that you're using or a fine liner, something totally black, but I'm adding the little smiles, and I'll go in and add the little stinger. If you want them to be totally black, I recommend using a fine liner or a pen. I won't be going over them again. So when I'm using fine liners, one of the main reasons that I use them is because they're smudge proof with alcohol markers. So if you're going on top of your image, you don't actually need to use a fine liner. You could use any black pen. It's really when you're drawing and then you're using alcohol marker over top of the fine liner, then you're really worried about smudging. Or if you run your hand along your drawing, it might smudge. So anyway, I'm using a Copic fine liner here, and I wanted them holding hands. So I have their top legs just holding hands, and the arm in the back, it's like their arms are going around each other. And bees have 6 arms or legs, I don't know what you want to call them. So I'm going in and just adding the remaining legs and doing a little tiny like foot at the bottom of each leg. And for the hand that's holding hand, I just do like a little circle with a couple of lines in the middle to make it look like fingers. But I mean, bees don't have fingers, so you don't have to follow it perfectly. And then this is a paint pen, but you can use any gel pen, anything that isn't see-through you can use. You could even use a little dot of paint if you have white paint. And I'm just adding a big circle and a little circle, and then sometimes I add a little line going around the side of the eye, just to give it an extra little sheen. But you can just do one white circle, or you could do one big one and one little one. It's up to you. Then anytime I draw something and there is, I want to have a little shadow, sometimes I'll add a thick line underneath. So I'm just adding a line underneath the bum, but I don't want it to go all the way around the bee because I want the top of the bee to be sort of a softer look. So this is going to look like it's a little bit shaded underneath the bee. And then I'm going in with a gray, a darker gray, and I'm going to add his little, or their little bee stripes, so the little black stripes, and making sure to draw them in a sort of C shape so that they look rounded, and it's not, I'm not just going straight across. This is not a circle, this is a little sphere bee. So we want to make sure we're giving it some volume. I want them to look like little hairy fat bees. So I'm doing a little bit of a marker stroke here, just like a back and forth motion with the chisel tip, just to make it look like it's a little bit hairy. And I'll go all the way around. And I only did 2 stripes. You can do as many as you want. You could do smaller stripes. I just felt like these little fat bees needed two fat stripes. So now I'm going to grab my fine liner again, and we're going to add some little antennas to our little bees. And I thought of it after, I should have added little hearts to the antenna, but all I did was little lines, and then they kind of curve forward just a tiny bit, like they're pointing towards one another. And then of course these bees are in love, so we have to give them some floating hearts above their heads. So I actually probably should have gone a little bit lighter with this, but I did little hearts and then I filled them in. I like to do this kind of thing in an odd number, so like a 3 or 5 hearts. Every once in a while you'll see me do them in an even number, but I usually like to do things like this, like when I'm adding extras, I like to do it in odd numbers. So I have 5 little hearts here. I'm adding them in a mid-tone pink, and then I took my yellow and I like to add little splotches, kind of like it looks like a watercolor where you would spray the paint onto the canvas. And then I'm just cleaning up where I tried to make it look round with the deeper shade of yellow. And then when I originally recorded this, I actually forgot to put the wings on, and I did the whole video. So now I'm going back in and doing the wings. But with the hearts, I don't know if you noticed, I made them a little bit darker on the bottom as well, and I forgot to record that. Sorry, it's a little bit of a messy video. But I'm just using a really light gray here to make the wings look translucent. This is the color I'm using there. That was from the grayscale set. And then I'll go in with a little bit of a blue shade, so also from my grayscale set. You may have noticed that I absolutely love my Ohuhu grayscale set. I use it a lot, so I really love the neutral tones and having a lot of different types of grays. They have green grays, blue grays, and cool grays. So this is a blue gray I'm going in with now, just to make it look a little varied in color. You could just leave it with the light gray with just the one color, and it doesn't need to be from the set. It can be any gray. It could be, if you got a cheap alcohol marker set, just find a light gray and you can do it that way. And if you don't have any grays, you can just use, I'm going to be using a fine liner in a second. You could just do it just with the fine liner instead. So like I said, now I'm going to be using the fine liner, and this is a micron, so I was previously using a Copic. You can use whatever you want. The Copic, my Copic is a little bit thicker, and it was the one that was closest to me. So there's not really any rhyme or reason to this. I just wanted the wings to have a lighter or like a thinner line, so I went with the micron 005. But you can use whatever you want. You could just use a pen or pencil if you wanted to too, depending on what look you're going for. So I'm just outlining my wings and then adding kind of like some little wiggly lines that make it look like they have, you know how like wings have little veins and stuff in them. So I'm just adding, and there's not really any technique to this. I'm just adding little wigglies and just finishing off that last wing there. And now you have 2 little bees in love. So let me know what you think. Leave any questions or comments below and I'll answer everything I can. And let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.